Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Backyard Professor Live. I've been a busy boy this last week doing a lot of BYP Respond. If you weren't aware of it, I have a lot of new videos up for you. I am responding to everyone, to atheists, to wannabe atheists, to Jewish rabbis, to Mormon prophets, to Mormon apostles, to regular Joes, to historians. So yeah, I guess I've got a lot on my mind, and I'm responding to a lot of people. Hello, everybody. Hi, Debbie Donovan, Tim Rathbone, Doug Vincent, Mark Crispin. All right, all you guys, I have a spectacular guest tonight, and we have a spectacular issues that we're going to talk about. Let's bring on, hold on, I see her picking her nose, but I mean, no, she's not. Oh, she's going to kill me for that. She was fluffing her hair. Hi, Summur.
Oh my goodness.
Come on, you expected that. It's me, you know.
I know. I was trying to be all kind of ready when you brought me on, and I'm cracking up already. Goodness gracious.
I would only do that with you. Oh, my. Well, thank you for being on this show.
I'm so excited.
Well, we are happy. We are thrilled. I say we, meaning the royal we, you and I. We're it. So yes. I am not big enough and rich enough to have a task force of 22 people behind the scenes doing everything except the camera work. I do it all at this point. So when I do need to have someone, you're on the list, young lady.
I'm there.
All righty. Hey, I think one of the main reasons that I wanted to have you on my show is so I could just publicly say sincerely, with a heart full of gratitude, thank you so much for being my good friend and being at Sunstone a couple of weeks ago, because you are really the only direct reason why I purchased Matthew Harris's book, Second Class Saints, which we are going to talk about from your perspective and from your reading and all. I've got a confession I will tell the audience. Literally, I had already bought, well, this book just barely put me over the $400 range of books on that weekend. And I just went on one day, Saturday, man. But the bookstore, Kurt Bench and Benchmark Books, my gosh, they had just tables and tables and tables and tables laid out all over the place with hundreds and hundreds of books. And I had already bought all my books, and Summur showed up and said, she grabbed me by my mustache. Come here, you. And she pulled me over to the bookstore and she said, Matthew Harris's book. We went to look for it and we couldn't find it. And she was getting pretty upset. She said, you have to have this book. So we asked Kurt, and he said, oh, yeah, we've got one left. It's over there.
One more left.
So Summur jumped up over the table, knocked it over, scattered books all over, plowed over poor Kurt Bench and his helper, knocked off the cash register off the table, got to the other table, came to a slitting halt just in time to bump it, and all of the other books fell off the table except my copy. It was a miracle. And so I got it.
True story based on actual events.
You know we're lying, right? However, the excitement was that palatable. I was impressed because you were just truly, you were really adamant. You really were. I have never seen anyone being that adamant with me before about books.
I mean, you had a whole stack. You had a whole stack of books, and you were walking, and I said, did you get Second Class Saints? And you said no. I said, no, you 1,000% have to get this book. Let's go over. And so we went right over right then. I didn't leave your side until we found that book. And there's one copy left. They'd sold out completely except for one copy. So it was right there for the Backyard Professor. And then I want to say within 72 hours, I got a message from you saying, oh my gosh, I did not know what this book was going to be. And I said, I told you.
Yeah. I Now, I still work full time. I've got a few years left before retirement. So I basically have evenings. And I will confess, I do have a lunch hour. And it took me just
Oh,
3 days to read this book. I read for the 45 minutes on lunch and then in the evenings. And literally every chapter was an eye-opening chapter because
wow.
showed the,
Mm.
how do we put this, Summer? The humanity
Oh,
or the inhumanity? It shows the brethren,
both.
both. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it
Shows the
shows
brethren in a
both.
bad light in so much. And it
Yeah.
didn't have to be that way.
It didn't have to be that way. And I will say, too, this book is good for anybody to read. Never Mormons, Mormons, Postmo, Exmo. It's a history. It's a history book. It will make, if you are an acting member, a believing member, it will make you uncomfortable, but it is not written as an anti anything. It is history. And it is, I just, my shelf breaker, I don't know if I ever told you this, but my shelf breaker was the priesthood essays, and reading that essay and learning things that I had never heard of before, right? It's kind of like
Yeah.
Shakespeare says, thou doth protest too much. That's how that essay felt to me, because I'm
Oh,
reading it and all of a sudden they're saying, well, we don't believe that blacks were not valiant in the pre-mortal existence. And we don't, and I'm thinking, wait, what? Whoever said that? So it was very hard. I'd never heard of Elijah Abel. So now I'm learning of someone who had the priesthood and it was taken away. It was a very difficult essay for me to read, but it was the part in there where the church says, and I should have looked this up before, but it's the part where the church says Brigham Young even prophesied that the ban would be lifted. And then they have a little bit, little number there, footnote for you to follow. And I was thinking, I don't remember hearing Brigham Young saying that this ban was going to be lifted. And so I followed that footnote, which you're not really supposed to do with the essays. And that is not what he said. That was not what he said. It was a very horrible speech in front of the Utah legislation. He says a lot of things, including that, and I like to mention this, that a black man, a man of African descent, will never rule over he or his brethren in Utah or in the land, meaning they'll never hold office. And my father is congressman of Utah on a federal level. So I kind of think like he's kind of giving a middle finger to Brigham Young there.
mhm.
But it was a difficult thing to read because the church was blatantly saying that Brigham Young had said that they were going to lift the ban at some point. And when you read what he wrote, he was not saying that at all. So that started my shelf breaking, was the racial issues of not just what was said, but that the church was kind of trying to whitewash it in a way that was completely false, right? So when I got a hold of this book, I actually saw Matt on Mormon Stories with John DeLynn, and I said, whoa, this book sounds phenomenal. And when I bought it and I got it, I read through it in 2 days. I just read right through. Because it was so much. And I mean, as you said, as soon as you pick it up, the first chapter, some books it takes a little while to get into. This
Not this
one,
one.
it's like, this is what they said, this is what Joseph Smith said, this is what Brigham Young said. And it was kind of cathartic for me to have in one place all of the things that I had struggled with the church, if that makes sense. It talks about the priesthood ban, interracial marriage, where the brethren stood on those things, where other people outside the church, within the church, stood on those things. And it made me feel like, wait, I always knew this, but I was told it wasn't true. I was told it was the culture. It's just how some people think. No, it was the leadership. And so it's a book that helps people like me who was raised in the church and we are not white, to say, this is why I got those looks, or this is why that little kid called me a Lamanite. This is why, because leaders were saying things. And so, yeah, I don't want to go on a rant. I will rant.
No, boy.
So you
Good.
need to carry this
Come
out.
on, baby. You think you can out rant me? Let's have a rant contest, baby. You're on.
This is the book to rant about. So
Sure.
yeah, it was just phenomenal. Was there anything that you read that just kind of stopped you in your tracks and kind of said, whoa, I had no idea? Because you know a lot and you've read a lot. What in this book did you read that you were thinking, whoa, that makes a lot of sense now that I know, but I had no idea?
Yeah. I'm going to be quite frank with you. I learned more new information. A lot of the books, after a while, you read 400 or 500 books and there's a lot of repeat information, even though it's on a completely different subject, right? So you basically understand the gist and all. This subject, I just am not up to par with. And sincerely, at the very least, every single chapter took my breath away. That's why I could not put the book down.
That's on purpose. I believe that's on purpose. You say that you read 400, 500 books, and this book still brought those things. I truly think that this is a subject people don't want to touch. Either you get very angry because you're post-mo, or you're in the church and you don't want to talk about what these leaders have said. So I think that it says a lot that a lot of this information was new to you because you know so much. I mean, you knew about the priesthood ban, but this book still blew your mind.
But you know what? I did not know about Elijah Abel until after my second marriage.
Wow.
I was in my almost apologetic years before I had ever even heard of Elijah.
Wow.
And when I heard who he was and what had happened, that was tough.
Yeah.
I was asking, I don't have any context for this.
Yeah.
The black man had the priesthood. Wait, I remember sitting in my mom's driveway in our blue Plymouth Fury 3 when the radio announced the blacks will now get the priesthood in 1978. And I had never heard of Elijah Abel until I was far into my adulthood. Two items that I will mention, and then I want to get more of your fabulous information on this, that just positively hurt me, is to realize that it was my hero, B.H. Roberts, who taught the ridiculously stupid, unconfirmable doctrine. Even the Holy Ghost didn't tell one damn soul this, that the blacks were not valiant enough in the pre-existence.
Yeah.
That began with my man, H. Roberts.
Yeah.
Come on, don't contaminate yourself with this shit. And there it is.
Yeah.
And I'm going, oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Second thing, I'm going to promise not to rant if I can help it, but hang on. The second thing that is just galling to me, it's bitter, it's acid reflux to my soul, is after the ban was lifted. Now, of course, and we know, and we'll talk about this tonight a little bit. The ban didn't solve any doctrines. No. They just simply said, "Oh, guess what? Now all worthy males can hold the priesthood." Right. But it didn't solve any problems. No. What it did is it exposed the racism, and poor Gordon B. Hinckley. But I'll tell you what, he comes off pretty well in this book. I
Yeah.
get new respect for Gordon B.
Yeah.
Hinckley now.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm even giving credit where credit's due. And the man is raised in my estimation because of the way he fought the ridiculous racism within the church. But the part that just galled me, and I can't remember exactly which one was saying this, but of course, the excitement. Oh my gosh. Now, every male can hold the priesthood, and there's a rapid influx of black folks.
Yes.
And the first thing out of those bastards' mouths in charge was, oh, now hold on.
Be careful.
To stay a white church. We don't want the church to become black. We have to stay white. So don't baptize too many of them.
I mean, that's the thing is, I feel like that. Well, that's what I think the problem is a lot of people, again, this is when you're in the church, right? You just hear, we don't know why, but Lord lifted it. We're happy. You don't hear, which is what Matt talks about in his chapter, debris in the streets, because there was debris. This was not doctrinal. I don't know if anyone needs to hear this, but there was no scripture basis and there's no doctrinal basis. There was never a revelation about the priesthood ban. And it
there never did go back to Joseph Smith.
And it did not go back to Joseph Smith. And David O. McKay, I believe it was, had the Benyon report that came out that he specifically said, I need you to go and go through all the books, go through all our records and tell me where it's doctrinal and it's scriptural. And the Benyon report came back and told David O. McKay, we have nothing. The scriptures don't back it. And we don't have a prophet that's backed it. So on both fronts, and he said it's actually antithesis to the gospel of Christ, just so you guys are aware. And they buried it. They didn't want to lift it then. But it was President Kimball who made a decision. We're going to lift this because there's a lot of different factors that we'll probably talk about. But the sad thing for me was to hear that it was lifted, and then President Kimball goes and speaks to some stake presidents, and he says in that meeting, we don't want to baptize too many black members. We want to keep this a white church. It was President Kimball. It was the same person who lifted the ban is the one who made that comment. So it's hard because what I loved about this was it showed the humanity of, when I say humanity, how real these are humans. And we hear all the time, product of their time. But in this book, you see, just like you said with B.H. Roberts, I mean, I've heard so much more about him after deconstructing than I ever heard when I was a member. I'd never even heard who he was, which I'm sure surprises you, Carrie, that was not a Sunday school lesson, right? B.H. Roberts never came up, but they never talked about it when I was an active member about him. But then I read things like this and you learn that people are not villains and heroes, right? They are complex people. We have our beliefs and we have to allow people to have that room and space. I think in Mormonism, unfortunately, we're taught to not give our church leaders that room and space because we are told that they hear from God, right? And so what they say goes.
By them.
By them, exactly. We are taught by them not to question, right? When I think the saying is, when the prophet speaks, the thinking stops, or something like that.
The thinking's done. Dallin Oaks just said that in the last decade again.
Absolutely. And so that's the thing is, I think what this book did for those, again, who are in a place where you're ready to hear just truth, like it doesn't, not good, bad, just truth. It helps you to see these people as people. I am not a Mark Peterson fan. Shocker. He is not an apostle that I look up to. He was actually a huge shelf breaker for me. Just side note, not even just about this, about his racial issues, but how he felt about women, about the LGBTQ. I mean, he was a bigot. He just was. Spoiler alert. But this book allowed me to see him for who he was, right? The era that he lived in, how he grew up in this bubble. I mean, he grew up in a bubble. What to me was so interesting is, and I don't know if you've been seeing this a lot, Carrie, but I've been hearing a lot of apologetics kind of demonize Brigham Young. Still want to hold Joseph Smith in that celestial positioning, but demonize Brigham Young as, he wasn't perfect. He was this, sure, he was racist, but he was the lion and that's what God needed. But they don't talk about how the beliefs were still permeating through the church. So to read in the first chapter, Brigham Young is saying some really horrible stuff. I mean, he talks about blood atoning, interracial marriages, the children who are product of the interracial marriage. Go ahead.
May I add a small detail?
Yes.
Brigham Young literally did teach that if you see a white man with a black woman married or a black man with a white woman married, you are justified through the law of Christ to kill them both.
Kill them. Yes.
Slay them.
That is blood atonement. Absolutely. And
Ow.
He said that was to the Utah legislation, and that was the speech that the church took a little sentence out of and said, Brigham Young said that the priesthood will go to all mankind. So I go to this speech and I'm reading this and saying, wait, what? This is not the man that's saying that the priesthood is going to be blessed to everybody. He was not saying that. But he did say, and he said in the speech, I know this is hard for you to hear about blood atoning, which for those that don't know, blood atonement was a practice that said that there are certain sins that are so egregious that the atonement of Christ cannot even cover it. And so Brigham Young believes that the sin of an interracial marriage, a white man and a black woman, was so egregious that they needed to be killed and atoned in this life for them to be forgiven. And their children.
Do you know that comes from the Old Testament? It is a misinterpretation,
Yes.
But that is based on the Old Testament, on
Yes.
an idea in the Old Testament. And I'm studying Hebrew now, and I'm trying to read the Old Testament in Hebrew. So when I get to that point, I'm going to earmark that, do a good study on it. But
please do, because I had never even heard of blood atonement. And then I started hearing about it with, fundamentalists and things like that. And then when I read this and said, wow, you're saying that this is a sin, that bad. But then the next page in this book, I'm reading how Joseph Fielding Smith, the next prophet, said that the reason why Black people were on the earth after the flood was because Satan needed representation. So I had never heard that before, but I was thinking that makes sense. People would come to him and say, well, what about the flood? Like, we're talking about Cain and all that, but the flood happened. He said the reason why there were Black people on earth after the flood was because Satan needed representation. So this was the prophet right after Brigham Young, right? So it didn't stop with Brigham Young. It didn't begin and end with him. I know that makes people feel a little bit better to think, okay, it was just this one racist prophet. I don't know how to make you feel better, but
I wish it was, but no.
Yeah, but it wasn't. And I think what Matt does too is he makes a point to say, these men, why would you expect them to not think the way that they think, given that they grew up in Utah, they didn't know anybody of a different race, and they are a part of this Americana that when you study American history, certain things are happening. So I love the book because I feel like we said earlier, it talks about the humanity of people, but also the inhumanity, because it's different to say, I believe this because it's what I believe. Or to say, it's different to say I believe this because I believe it versus saying I believe it because God told me. That's where we start to get into problems.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, I think that, and I hope I'm not hop skipping and jumping too much. The inherent racism that was bequeathed to every prophet after the former prophet passed on, it is clearly there as a significant red thread in Mormon history that is just now beginning to be comprehended thanks to the work of Harris. But the one thing that shocked me, that's not quite the right word, but Spencer Kimball, to come much more up into our day, Spencer W. Kimball, and we talked about this last week. Doug and I talked about this book last week also, and I wanted to get your perception of this as well as Doug, because you guys are so much better than I am at this. Spencer W. Kimball had no choice. It's remarkable that just one or two members of the Quorum of the 12 had such astonishing power as to stop Jesus Christ from giving the revelation.
Yeah.
That's mind-boggling. The prophet could not act unless there was total unanimity, right? Well, Spencer Kimball, though, got a letter from someone during this, I believe this is when several of the different schools were continuing to refuse to play BYU in sports, and it was during the
Civil Rights Act movement. It was passed, and BYU was not segregated.
BYU was not well liked, justifiably so. But that letter to Kimball said, "Dear bigot Kimball," and then went on the rant and rave. Kimball took that letter into the Quorum of the 12 in the first presidency. And after their meeting, they were all there. He stood up and he said, "I wish to read something to you." And he had been trying to get this thing changed. And he read it. "Dear bigot Kimball." And then he began to cry, and he looked up at the other people, of the other leaders, and he said, "I am not a bigot." My belief, I have no evidence to justify this, but I believe President Kimball was trying to shame Mark E. "I'm more bigot than you'll ever be" Peterson. And several of those who were just truly outrageously atrocious with this.
Absolutely.
And Doug pointed out last week in a very important point, he said, President Kimball got to the point in all of this back and forth that had gone on for over 100 years, man. He got to the point to where he said, "I am going to get rid of this.
I'm going to do this.
And he began to work it so that he could. Now that's, to me, that's marvelous. I don't, at this point, it is irrelevant to me whether it came from heaven or from Kimball. I don't care. The point is, it got changed. Yes. But that elevated President Kimball, in my opinion, because David O. McKay, bless his heart, he was a bit open-minded. Greg Prince's biography on him, though, just blew my mind in that he was a complete pushover. McKay was so wishy-washy that it just shocked the heck out of me how weak he was. And
we don't know that.
"Oh, you want to do that? Okay, let's do that." Then someone else would oppose him and they go, "Oh, well, you want to do it different? Okay, well, then let's do it your way." He would not take
it's interesting.
Kimball did.
And I think that's what's so interesting is not only did Kimball take a stand, but He said, I am a student of history. I understand what this will do to the church if we don't have unanimity. So what do I do? Well, let me get rid of the people who would vote no. That's what he did. He said,
That's what he
I'm
did.
going to send Marky Peterson on a trip. I'm going to send him on a mission. Somebody said to me the other day, they said, back in the day, Joe Smith sent people on missions to marry their wives. Spencer W. Kimball was sending them on missions to change Revelation. And I said, yeah, that's true. But I have heard from LDS historians, well, no, it was unanimous. They don't do anything if it's not unanimous, even though they know Marky Peterson was not there and they know why he wasn't there. But they won't say that because he signed a letter later. And in this book, we learned that he signed the letter with the to say, I will sign this as long as you make a strong point that we do not believe in interracial dating or marriage.
Yes.
And the church and the church put that up there. The church said, we are lifting the ban, but we believe that you guys should stay separate. That's the only reason why Marky Peterson said, okay, if he was not okay with this. And if anyone is a student of Marky Peterson and you know what he has said, you will know he would not have been a fan of this. I mean, he would have been the layman of the Book of Mormon where the angel would have had to keep coming back to him because he was like, nope, I know better than God. I'm not even going to pray about this. What was the name of I think it was called the Mormons and the Negro Problem. Was that the name of he did a speech to church educators. And if you guys get a hold of that, if you want to look it up, there's some pretty nasty stuff in there. Matt writes it in his book, but like you said, I had a lot of respect for Kimball. What I knew of him was, Miracle of Forgiveness. I knew the whole, I did know that he was not for interracial marriage. I learned that after I got married. So I didn't, but I knew the ban was lifted under him. I just did not know what he had to do to have it happen.
I didn't either. That's why I say this book, every chapter was like an amazing, I had never learned that before, but it makes sense because now I can swing in this idea and pull this idea together. And okay, now the history, my understanding of the history is a little bit more complete. It makes sense why my dad would teach me what he did when I was a youth based on what I read in this when I'm 63 years old.
Yep.
That's how lousy of a teacher the church is.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing. And that's why I've said this multiple times. I appreciate this book because I'm really sick of the leaders blaming the church members. I just hear it all the time. Well, no, it's the culture. Even in the priesthood essay, if you were to read that, they, number one, say we don't know where it came from, which is a lie. It's documented where these came from.
They know exactly where it came from.
But then they also, Dallin H. Oaks is very open in the B1 to say this was God, right? So it's either God's fault for being racist, or it's the church members' fault for being racist. But it wasn't the leaders. And so what I appreciate about this book is that there's an acknowledgement of this is why your parents were teaching you what they were teaching you. They were not just bigots who were just taking things out of a hat and decided to make up these things. No, your parents, your aunts, your grandparents, they believed this because their leaders were teaching this at the pulpit. And the internet is undefeated. Nowadays we have the ability to see these speeches all over again. But back in the day, they could say, no, we don't know where this came from. That's not true. We know where it came from.
Yeah, it's the interesting thing also, I made a big whoop-de-doo about it last week. I probably won't this week, but it is really one of the most imperative points of this entire book because I was so mortally offended as an apologist when I discovered things like this, but I brushed it under the rug. But the other thing I will say, and I know everyone sit down, BYP is going to say something that's going to shock you. Bruce R. McConkie actually did the right thing, but for the wrong reason. Now, that's not a surprise, but he actually did the right thing. And what he did was, now, Bruce R. was, of course, the son-in-law to Joseph Fielding Smith. Mm-hmm. There was only one man worse than Joseph Fielding Smith, and that was Mark E. Peterson. Yeah. Joseph Fielding Smith had the authority of being the church historian for a long time, and then an apostle, and then the prophet. Well, Bruce R. McConkie had that ace up his sleeve at all times, so he could literally tell anyone where the bear pooped in the woods in any type of wording he wanted to say, and they would have
listened.
So it is impressive. Literally, he was absolutely against lifting the ban. Make no mistake about that. And then, as Kimball's ideas were moving, and the nice thing is we now know outside pressure from the world against them were showing the Mormons, you're way wrong, you're backwards, you better rethink your stance. Kimball kept informing the brethren, we're not going to be able to do this now, or, oh, guess what? BYU's in trouble for this reason. And they couldn't understand it. Marky Peterson, they actually were threatened to lose the federal funding. And I can't remember if it was Marky Peterson, one of them, maybe it was Harold B. Lee. Anyway, one of them said, who cares? We don't want their money. And someone came along and said, hold it, time out. Whoa, you have no idea what you're, wait, stay calm. Wow. That's not the move to make.
Easy there, Tiger. We're talking money here.
Yeah,
calm down.
Checkmate, man. Don't do this. So anyway, McConkie was right there basically agreeing, we don't need the federal funding because we're not going to give in to interracial marriage. The answer is not no. The answer is, brethren, no.
Yeah.
He changed his mind. I can't remember what event it was, but Kimball was always meeting with the brethren to let them know as a group, okay, here's the new development, you guys. This is not good. Or he would say, okay, I gave a talk over here. I invited these people over to here. They were impressed. So this is the right way to approach this. Well, through the give and take of several years of work, Bruce R. McConkie changed his mind. And he agreed to support President Kimball. That just rocked me. I was in tears for saying so many bad things about that holy man, that great spirit-guided man, until I read the next 10 pages.
Well, that's what I was going to say.
And there was a reason
it still was
why.
there. Yeah, he still is who he is, but it's interesting because
he had my heart for 5 pages.
Yeah, but like you said, Bruce R. McConkie, he was the doctrinal stalwart. I mean, people went to him, and the Benyon report that I mentioned earlier that said that there is no doctrinal basis, there is no scriptural basis. McConkie is the one that says, hold my Diet Coke, I'll make it doctrine, right? So he is the one who makes it. He's like, okay, if no other prophet's done it before, I'll do it now. And he makes it doctrine.
Here, hold this. I'm going to make this new doctrine.
Yeah.
But he could do that. I love that expression. Here, hold my Coke. I'm going to make it.
Yeah. No, he was like,
Well, isn't
like,
it,
guys,
isn't it McConkie that after the ban was lifted, he actually did make new doctrine?
Yes, he did.
That
yes.
was,
I mean, he just, he was, I mean, you know, God was talking to him all the time, apparently. But what I found the most interesting was that, right? McConkie was firmly against lifting the ban, but Kimball knew, and Matt talks about this. He says he knew that he needed McConkie on his side. And so he knew that the ones that were still on the fence that he could talk to, if he could get McConkie to say, no, we can do this, he knew he'd be good. The fact that he did not believe that Mark E. Peterson would still say that he would still say no, even with McConkie, says a lot. It says a lot of where Peterson was, because it should be a closed case if Bruce R. McConkie saying it, right? When you hear him say it, it's like, whoa, this is it. But Mark E. Peterson would have still said no. So he said, I've got to send him on a mission. I'll have Bruce R. McConkie talk to the other guys. We'll have this pass, and then I'll give Peterson a call and say, hey, listen, by the way, while you were gone, I'd love to hear your missionary report, but just so you know, we lifted the ban also. And then
am I remembering this right?
Back.
Am I remembering this right, Summur, that President Kimball actually sent Mark E. Peterson down to Brazil where the temple was being built, just so he could see the issue with those people that he was keeping the ban on, so to speak.
But do you know what he said? Mark E. Peterson came back and said, let's close Brazil. If we can't figure out who is Black and who is not, because Brazil is so multiracial, let's close the mission. It wasn't let's lift the ban or let's pray. It was instead of having the gospel roll across the world, let's shut the missions down so that Blacks do not get the priesthood. That was his, I mean, Peterson was no joke. I mean, he was a hard line. When I hear hardliner, that's Peterson. I mean, people talk all the time about who was worse, Brigham Young or Peterson. I think Peterson would have been Brigham Young if he was during that era.
Peterson makes Brigham Young look angelic.
Listen, Peterson was rough. And so the fact that Kimball, I just have so much respect for Kimball and what he did, because he also was the one that got
He used his brain.
He did it. Yeah. But also the fact that he, Boyd K. Packer's out here and other apostles were out here saying, oh, the Lord came down to us and, making this a big revelation. And President Kimball was upset. He was like, don't tell people that. That is not what happened. It did not happen that way. We spoke, we did pray about it, but it wasn't a visitation like Moses. And so I just had a lot of respect for him.
It was not just like Kirtland, as McConkie kept intimating.
Yes. I mean, it's so interesting. What I also realized in the book was, which I didn't know, was how the church goes through cycles of enlightenment, where you have these apostles and these prophets who are all about education, and they talked about BYU and how they had people from Chicago and I think Harvard Bible studies coming in, that it wasn't just like church, that they were all about education, and they were all about, listen, if you have a degree, we'd love for you to come and teach, kind of thing. And then when that old guard kind of died off, you've got like the Boyd K. Packers and the hardliners that say, no, if you don't have a testimony, you're off campus, right? And so they started firing all these professors that were very loved and liked. And then you kind of go through another cycle of which I grew up with President Hinckley and President Monson, where President Hinckley was all about the media, right? He wanted to talk to the media, and we're peculiar people, but we are very Christ-like, and we want to be in the world, but not of it. And President Monson was always talking about the Book of Mormon and love. And then you kind of have, this now cycle with President Nelson, where he says, don't take advice or talk to anyone who has left the church or is not a member of the church. So in this book, I saw this cycle of enlightenment. And I feel like that's what a lot of people talk about with President Uchtdorf. They say maybe, the church will be a little different when he's prophet. But the church goes through cycles because, the Lord is not telling these guys. I mean, I do believe that they think they're getting some type of revelation, but the Lord never told these patriarchs that they were lineage of Cain. That didn't happen. So if their patriarchs are saying that and the prophets are saying that, you're the lineage of Cain, which is what they were doing with these patriarchal blessings for Black people, you've got to understand and know this wasn't coming from God. So I hope that doesn't upset a lot of people, but just know God never told a patriarch that this person's the lineage of Cain. That didn't happen, guys.
God never told a patriarch any of us are from Ephraim or Manasseh or Levi or any of those either. The thing that blew my mind in this book was their decision to not do patriarchal blessings because of this problem, especially after the Blacks got the priesthood.
Well, the fact that
talk about
they got together.
I'm
telling you. There's a part in the book where they talk about the patriarchs got together with the church leaders and said, well, I know the ban's been lifted, but what if I still feel like they're the lineage of Ham? And the leaders are like, don't say that. It's not going to make you feel good.
Yeah, don't give them their lineage.
What spirit are you listening to that's saying that they're the lineage of Ham? Like, what is happening that you're being told by the leadership now, guys, we're not doing Cain and Ham anymore. And you're saying, no, I'm hearing Ham. I'm hearing Cain. That's not the right spirit. So, it just reminded me that, the church goes through cycles, and anybody who's in the church right now, just know that you're going to see a change because it's just the way the church works, that it's just what they do. They come kind of like with you, Carrie, where I had to take your mustache and say, come get this book. That's how the church is. They're like, we don't want to change it. It's like, no, come change. So
yeah, interesting. Yeah, that's fun. The whole at the very first part of the book, Summur, I'm the kind of guy that makes my own indexes, right? In my own books.
I do the same.
At the very first of it, I wrote, let's see if I can find this real quick. I said, oh my gosh, you guys have the answer right in front of your noses. Use the patriarchal blessing as the obvious solution to solve lineage problems. And that was rejected.
Yeah.
So what's the point of patriarchal blessing? That tells me it's all phony then. I mean
it's
I'm asking you Mormons who are watching this, please be patient with me for just a moment, but give me a better end to come to. Your prophets and apostles told the patriarchs to stop giving patriarchal blessings as a solution. So they didn't even believe in revelation that they themselves claimed they were getting from Jesus.
Or they would say, give a patriarchal blessing, but don't give the lineage.
Don't give the lineage.
Because there were some that said, don't give the lineage.
Patriarchal blessing?
And that's what was happening, was people were saying, wait a minute, the whole point of this blessing is to find my lineage. And now people are hearing their whole blessing pages of blessings and no lineage is being said, because they're saying, I know that you're a Black ancestry and I don't know what to say. But it's also interesting because there are some church leaders who, when Brazil was happening, that were saying, just pray about it and see what the Lord tells you. So there are church leaders who are saying, you know what, the Lord will guide you. So they believe that the Lord will guide them. And the people in Brazil are saying, guys, we're getting it wrong. I mean, there's a bishop who they were saying, make sure you're doing the genealogy, have everyone in your state do their genealogy. And he did his own and found out that he had African lineage. And they ended up allowing him to keep the priesthood, but they removed him as bishop. And that to me was heartbreaking, because they said you can do the priesthood within your home, but you can't be a bishop anymore. And I was just thinking, how would that feel to say you can do it in your home, but you can't do anything church related? But then I was thinking, how many other people during that era would have loved that, to say I can at least bless my home, and they weren't allowed that, right? Because there was inconsistencies. Some stake presidents were saying, no, if you have any lineage, you're out. You don't get the priesthood at all. Other people were saying, well, if you already have it, we'll let you keep it. It's a very difficult thing.
Other people actually began telling people, if the genealogy department couldn't find any one drop of African blood, and that amen to the priesthood of that man. That's how the DNC words it, you know. It wasn't power and gain like we have today. Right. I'm being sarcastic, but but when there were some places, if I remember correctly, I believe it was in Africa, where the church was beginning to spread better, and the people, the stake president and the bishops and the elders quorum presidents and the actual members, they would come up, the elders quorum president would come up to his bishop secretly late at night, so to speak, and say,
wow,
I found African blood in my lineage.
Yep.
And he goes, just don't tell anyone.
Don't tell anyone.
But they were taking the priesthood away.
Yeah.
And you go, that this whole fiasco is based on one man not liking the idea of not being Elohim over colored people, Brigham Young.
Yeah.
His idea of his universe remind me, when I get my Godhead, I don't even want to visit Brigham Young's universe, okay? Remind me just to stay the hell away from that.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to go over to Marky Peterson's, because I just want to see what he's doing over there. I'd be like, what does your planet look like over here?
Take bodyguards with you. He'll probably take away your priesthood. Oh, that's the other item that really torqued my britches. And yet, in a way, it shouldn't surprise us. I can't remember which apostle. Maybe you might, which might be good. But when the brethren described how the revelation occurred, and they said, well, we got together. We had been fasting. We said mighty prayer. We held a special convocation of a prayer circle, etc., like we do in the temple. And we all felt the Holy Spirit tell us, yes, this is the right decision. And the ladies asked, well, if you can do that for blacks, why don't you do that for women in the priesthood too? I can't remember if it was Mark E. Peterson or Joseph Fielding Smith. One of them said, oh, we don't even want to pray about that. Forget it.
Yeah. Oh, I don't remember who that was.
And you're going,
no, it wasn't a apostle.
Oh, dude, you really said that out loud?
Oh, yeah.
You really said that? No, we have no interest in praying about you women getting the priesthood. Forget it.
We don't want to even know what God has to say.
Well, that was their attitude up to Spencer W. Kimball's day about the blacks. So does it surprise us that it's about the women now? So, right?
No. Well, it just reminded me a lot of what's happening in the LGBTQ community right now, where even with Elijah Abel, he was the priesthood was taken away from him. There's kind of like some like disagreement on, was it taken completely away, or was he like kind of told he can only do it here? Kind of like the guy in Brazil where he said you can do the priesthood in your home, but then there are others that it's being taken away completely. Well, that's what makes me feel of like Charlie Bird, where here's a openly gay man. He's very popular on Instagram. He married his spouse, his husband, and takes sacrament. He is an active member of the church. But then you're hearing other stakes and other people are being excommunicated, right? If they get married in a same-sex relationship. So I'm seeing again a trend of the church kind of being behind in the times of what's happening in the world.
Kind of.
I'm trying to
your
listen.
Your charity is mind-bogglingly huge. Lovely lady.
I'm trying to keep the TBMs. I'm trying to keep listening right now. Okay? We've got Dan Vogel down there. I'm trying to keep the TBMs in listening. I want them to keep listening. So I'm
but in that case, Dan Vogel's a very important point. There is no scripture for the female ban either.
There's no doctrine or scripture. I'm sure that would have come up too if they decided to pray about it and do a report, but they decided not to. But I just see that. I see that the same thing that happened with blacks in the priesthood, there was an inconsistency where there was a full-on ban. And then they said, okay, we're going into these areas like Brazil. We can't keep it from all of them. They end up lifting the ban. And I see that right now with the LGBT community, where you're thinking, okay, you're allowing this couple to have a platform. I mean, they're not quietly in Alpine. They have a platform. They're on Instagram. It's Cosmo, I think is his name, BYU mascot. He's very open. And a lot of people are struggling with that because they're saying, okay, but I have family who, was excommunicated, but now the church is okay with them. And I feel like that's what happened with the blacks back then, was the black community, where they were saying, it's nice to hear that this is happening in this other part of the country, but here we're being segregated, or here we're being told we can't. So it's kind of bittersweet, right? To hear about all of these stories. There was a part in this book that Matt had put in once the ban was lifted. It says 1978, Apostle Thomas S. Monson called Monroe Fleming and Ruffin Bridgeforth shortly after the revelation was announced and broke the news. I expected it would come, Fleming rejoiced. I had faith. The policy change meant that Fleming would no longer feel like he was a guest in his father's house. Fleming, age 78, had been in the church for 25 years. And there's just stories like that. I can't imagine being in a church, being in a community that they're telling me that God sees me as a guest in his house because I did something that I had nothing to do with, right? Either something that happened in the premortal existence or something that an ancestor did. I'm a faithful member, and I'm being told not just priesthood, right? The temple, there's a temple ban. That's what people understand. There's no exaltation for this group of people.
Servants forever.
Be sealed. They're servants forever. They can't be sealed to their families. I mean, this is, as a member of the church since I was 3, all my life, that's what we're told. This is all about families being together, being sealed. It's the reason why my parents converted to the faith. The beautiful family sealing.
Absolutely.
To hear that there's a group of people that God said, you're not going to have that. It just doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. So yeah.
I really hope I don't. Maybe I shouldn't say this. No, I won't. Well, I get going and I say really bad things sometimes, and I hear about it later, and it makes me wonder why any black person ever joined the church.
Well, that is a big question.
What were they seeing that, I mean, I'm white, I'm male, I had all the advantages. I have been
Absolutely.
eating the ribeye steak of Mormonism now for my whole life until I quit.
Yeah.
And yet I quit. How
Yeah.
come second class saints
Yeah.
ever thought of joining even before the ban was lifted? Now the problem appears
No.
to me, and I hope it's being worked on for people's peace sake. But this book intimates time and again that this is not over. It's just one very small part. The worst part is now ours to try to solve, and that is the inbred, brainwashed racism in the members
Yeah.
because of their leaders for the first
Absolutely.
130 years. I
Absolutely.
hope that's being worked on, but I don't know. I haven't been to church for quite a while. I'm not about to try to go back just yet, if ever. It's all good to me, but this whole, it is a mystery wrapped in an enigma with a great big question mark. It's just so fascinating, and it's heartbreaking, and it's
Yeah.
very, very angering. And I'm one of the privileged guys. What are you getting so angry for, Shirt?
Absolutely.
You weren't held back. You got all
Yeah.
the benefits of being white and male. What are you griping about? Social justice issues like this, you read the scriptures. And my dad, interestingly, my dad raised me to be a literalist really seriously.
Wow.
And I took that. So in heaven, in God's kingdom, there are, and this you can't comprehend, but the theme you can. There are no male and female. There are no black and white. There
Right.
are no free or slaves. There are no Jews and Gentiles. We are all one.
One. Yeah.
And you go, that's pretty steep stuff. But
Yeah.
that was the ideal, except in Mormonism with the inspired revelation totem Mormon prophets and apostles. They didn't want to be one. And they said, no blacks and whites our ass. They're blacks and they're going to serve us for our celestial kingdom and our heaven for the rest of their eternity until everyone else gets the priesthood first. They couldn't even tell the people what they did in the premortal existence
Yeah.
to deserve this.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's what was interesting with this book too, is that Matt talks about how this is a Protestant belief. This is a belief among a lot of faiths. A lot of faiths have this belief of the curse of Cain, but Mormonism is the only faith that solidified it in a premortal existence, right? So we're the only faith that said it's because of something that you did before you even came down to earth. And
Right.
so that was something that, again, it's hard to wrap your head around. I hear all the time, how can a Black person be part of this church? But then I think about, as a woman in this church, the things that I hear. Like, I was telling you before we started, I still attend church. Sporadically, I attend with my children and my husband, because my husband is still a believing member. We go to a Polynesian ward, so it is a little bit different than an Orthodox ward. But just a couple weeks ago, they wanted to talk about Russell M. Nelson's talk about the priesthood. And in the talk, which I think was just the conference before, he says, imagine if we didn't have the priesthood. And I started crying, which I don't like doing, but I started crying during the class. It was Relief Society, so it was all the women. And I said, you guys, you need to understand, I don't have to imagine. Like, I know my people know what it's like to not have the priesthood. So I said it's very hurtful to me to read the words of the prophet of just a few months ago saying, imagine a world without the priesthood, or imagine if you didn't have the priesthood in your home. And I'm reading about my ancestors here in this country who were treated as second class citizens within America, but then the church takes those Jim Crow type of theologies, like the thinking of the one drop rule and segregation. The church takes that and says we're going to continue this within our own community and say it's from God. So it it's one of those things that even as a woman, I'm hearing the other women say, well, I don't want the priesthood. I mean, I hear women say they want the priesthood. I don't want that. I have enough on my plate. And I remember having that rationale. So it's just interesting when you're in a faith that you believe is true, how much you will internalize because you want to believe it's true. So when I see people who are Black that are in the church, I understand it because, or when I read about people who joined the church before the ban was lifted, I understand it somewhat because I see women do it now. I see people in the LGBTQ community do it now that are
Oh,
like, I am gay, but I still
you've
attend.
helped open my eyes here. Okay,
Yeah,
okay. Yeah. See,
it's just,
my understanding is so limited. So thank you for that. Very
yeah.
good.
So what you end up doing is when you are a marginalized group, you're taught to internalize it. You start to say, I'm the problem and I need to ask God why and what I need to do to fix myself. Because either it's the church, which you believe is God, or it's you. You have to make a decision. And if
Right.
you come to the decision that, wait, it's not me, that's not the kind of God I believe in, you leave the church. But if you want to believe in these precepts of the church, and again, missionaries are very good at what they do, right? When my parents joined the church in '83, they didn't hear anything about the ban. The ban had already been lifted, but
Yeah.
only by a couple of years. But
Right.
the missionaries never said anything like, hey, just so you know, we lifted this ban. My dad had no idea. And so, and he grew up in the segregated South. So he knows what segregation looks like. He knows what Jim Crow looks like.
Yeah.
And he knows what racism looks like. So he's joining a church and he had no idea. So just to kind of answer that question, I've realized that you either look at the church and the organization and say, let me question what this is, or you question yourself. And unfortunately, a lot of people will question themselves, and that's how they stay.
Very interesting. Thank you for sharing that. That's a really good. See, that's one reason why I wanted you on the show, because you have perspectives I can't even begin to think, and in that case, I can't begin to contribute to a potential solution, or at least contribute empathy for others who are in a position that I still can't even comprehend. For instance, as a segue into my next thought, and this is not a pleasant one, but there are still issues now. And I think the LGBTQ issues are, for lack of a better way to explain this, minimizing what the book kind of talked about post-ban era. Now we're dealing with the members and their attitudes, where the men and women don't even want to sit by Black people.
Mm-hmm.
They make them go out into the foyer to attend all of the meeting. No, I don't even want to take the sacrament in the same room with you, etc. Stuff like that.
They had blood. They had separate blood banks after the ban was lifted. Separate blood banks in Utah.
Yes.
I mean, we're talking. I mean, this is serious stuff, and it's all about the pure. It goes back to the purity of blood, a bloodline, right? Like the line of Ephraim, like the purity of blood, and the literalism of the Bible is what's happening. You know, Brigham Young. This whole thing with the priesthood ban happened because Brigham Young was hearing that there was interracial situations happening, and he was like, we need to stop this, because they believe there's a pure bloodline.
Yeah.
And so that's what I mean. The sacrament's separate, blood is separate. I mean, they are still, like you said, even with the ban being lifted, they're like, no, we're still going to be separated because your blood is still different than ours.
Yeah. Yeah. That means subconsciously your humanity is different than theirs too.
Absolutely.
And that means there is never going to be unification until we can learn to love the Lord our God with all our heart, might, mind, and soul, and love our neighbor like ourselves. We really don't take that to heart or seriously at all. It's hard one. And it is a hard one. I'm very blessed to have very good neighbors. One is a Spanish couple immediately to my left. The next one over is an absolute one of my best neighbors I've ever had for the last 30 years is a Mexican couple. Then the mixture in this neighborhood is really delightful, and we all get along very well. And I wouldn't change that for anything in the world. And yet within the church setting, when you get to trying to become, I'll say, spiritual, for lack of a better descriptor, if we're trying to elevate our spirituality and our greatness so that we can work toward learning how to become gods ourselves, as Joseph Smith is claimed to have said in the King Follett Discourse, then there's a lot of Mormons that aren't ever going to make it. Yeah. And won't it be fascinating when pretty much none of the apostles and prophets will?
Yeah.
And I know that's going to offend some Mormons, but just this is not an anti-Mormon book, I promise. Out of the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses. Summur said that. I'd say that. Doug Vincent says that.
Yeah.
It is
great
not,
episode, by the way, last week.
Signed as an it's not a poke in the eye type thing like I would write if I wrote something. So yeah.
Well, it's interesting because Matt's been called an apologist for this book, and he's also been called anti-Mormon. So I think that he did his job, because if you're kind of if both sides are kind of not happy, it means that you kind of stuck with the truth and kind of the history, and you didn't want to go either way. So yeah, I think I when you talk about if there's going to be change, first of all, with regards to this, right, this book and racial equality and things like that, there has to be an acknowledgement. There has to be an acknowledgement by the church. This was not from God, first and foremost. Right now, they are playing that game of, we disavow it, but we don't know where it came from. Whoever said it before, we don't believe it. But they have to take ownership. That's the only way that, do what is right, let the consequence follow. The only way to move forward is to acknowledge, own it, and say, this was wrong, and we do not believe in it anymore. But I find that there's always going to be issues, and this isn't just in the Mormon faith or the LDS faith. This is in faiths, because
they're not the only racist groups.
Yes,
that has had trouble in the past.
But that's also true. There's always an othering. There has to be an othering, even without race. Like we talk about gender, we talk about anything. There always has to be an othering, and when I say that, I say, within religion, there always has to be the chosen, right? Like, we know this, and unless you're with us, you're going to go to hell or outer darkness, whatever you want to call it. Evangelicals believe that, Catholics, right? So the problem is that with the LDS church in the beginning, I think the race thing was easy to other people, right? To say, we are the chosen people, and the Black people are less than. Once they lifted the ban and they said, okay, we're gonna, once they decided to not segregate anymore, there's still an elitist attitude, because we're in a community that has to always have someone who's not part of us. I don't know if I'm making sense, but now what you hear is, you know, you don't understand because you're not part of our faith, or, you know, you're not going to have celestial whatever because you're not baptized. You haven't taken the covenants. There's always going to be an othering. And so I don't know if that's ever going to change, because that's what a lot of religions are based on. They're based
All
on making
religion.
sure, all religions, right?
One
I
of
mean,
the
unless there's a religion that just says be a good person and you'll, you know, but I don't know of one. Most of the religions say this is the way, you
I
know,
do.
like
Yeah.
the Mandalorian, this is the way, like this is it.
I
And
know
so,
one.
yeah.
It's Buddhism.
Oh, which one? The backyard
Buddhism.
professor faith?
Huh? Is
The
your kid
backyard
wanting to say
professor.
hi? Put your kid on there.
My
Wait.
son.
Hey, come
Oh,
over here,
he's
buddy.
on the thing. Come say
Yeah,
hi.
okay. Yeah.
They can
I'll
hear
wave
you.
hi to you.
Come say, come.
I can hear you. Show up.
No,
Hey.
now he's leaving. I was
Now-
muting myself to tell him to leave, but
I scared him.
that's the chess player, by the way. That's the one that watches your
nice.
chess.
And I
your
didn't
chess
do a
one.
Saturday chess. I goofed up. I'll have to make up for it this week with some chess videos. Here's my when I recognize that there is just not enough celestial, but it's all talk about celestial. But even in the highest of the highest, holiest of the holies within Mormon humanity, they don't practice it. They don't really believe it because they already think they're second anointed and they've made it. So I went full atheist. As an atheist, it dawned on me, all religion divides. How you have expressed that is so interesting. There's always going to be otherness.
Yeah.
And yet they say, well, we are here to reunite. The very etymology of the word religio is a relinking into a unity, right? Religio, to link back to the heaven, the celestial and all. But religion keeps making more chain links instead of linking all the links that are here.
Yep.
And how do we overcome that problem is utterly past anyone that I know of on our planet still.
I mean, it's difficult because I do think it's human nature to want to feel special. That's why tribalism happens, right? That's why, like, the political parties and people want to feel special. And so they find groups to make themselves feel special. Unfortunately, when you form a group, there has to be someone that's on the outside of that, or else it's not a group. And so that's what I found, is that there's a lot of things that can be improved within the church if they were to acknowledge certain things and take ownership. But religion on its face, and this can go for politics, any type of group, it's meant to divide. It's not meant to bring together. It's meant to bring together specific people, but it can only exist if there's people on the outside. Because if there's no one on the outside, you're not special. There is no group, right? If everybody's in it, then we're all together. So I don't know. It's hard. It's human nature to want that, but it creates elitism, where you say, I'm better than you because of this.
On our one most important group, humanity.
Right. No.
We want, this is the United States of America. Make America great again. We're Africa over here. We're Russia over here. We're Ukraine. We're Siberia. And so we tribally would rather exist fighting than living in peace as humanity.
Yeah. And I mean, I look at even within our country, you know, my father is a congressman and he played in the NFL, and, you know, standing for the flag and being patriotic was a big thing when he was in the NFL in the 70s and 80s. But what I find the most interesting is that it's no longer we're Americans, right? It's I'm West Indian American, I'm Black American, I'm so even with that, and again, I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing to want to belong to something bigger than just the biggest group. But I do see how it starts to separate us and makes us say, because I'm Black American, I am different than you. Whereas, 20 years ago when I was in school, we were all American. Like, I'm on the East Coast in New York, so diverse. We're all American. There was no, I'm this, I'm this, I'm this, right? It was this person immigrated from this country, they're now American. But I just feel like there's a need within humans to want to be special and different. And I see that within Mormonism big time. It's weird because I grew up with us being a peculiar people. And I feel like now we're not as peculiar as when I was growing up. But, there's still this thought process of I know and you don't know. And so even if it's not racial, I just always think there's always going to be a divide. Women they can't pray about the women getting priesthood. They can't, because that would get rid of that divide. Right now it's man and woman, family proclamation. And if God were to ever say, no, they can have the priesthood, that's a divide that is now healed or united, or I don't know if I'm using the right terminology, but it takes it away. The specialness of it.
Point. Just so that I wonder if perhaps part of the solution would be to not see being different as an evil or as a lesser than. I don't know. Because they want us all, when I was a deacon, to wear white shirts and ties, or we were not worthy to pass the sacrament.
Yeah.
And one kid never had any colored shirts.
A white shirt.
So or white shirts. All he had was colored shirts. He was too poor to own a tie. So I gave him one of mine, and I wore a colored shirt to make him feel comfortable.
Wow.
And we both got in trouble for it. But it's interesting that even at that age, I didn't feel like I cared enough to worry about what kind of. My dad defended me, by the way. I know he was a literalist, but he really did come to my aid.
But think about all the other boys that were in your age group that looked at that boy and felt better about themselves because they had a white shirt and he didn't.
And they conformed.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah. It appears to me religion makes you a conformist, not a leader. I don't know. Yeah. I'll have to ponder that one, because I'm not a conformist, if you didn't know that already. I mean, I'm the backyard professor.
I didn't know that.
I'm not. Nobody on live YouTube does stuff like that. Nobody grabs a book. That's too good of a book to throw. Anyway, nobody grabs a stupid book and throws it at the backyard professor.
There we go.
Get away with crap like this. So anyway, oh man, what a remarkable book. And sincerely, from my heart, I love you, girl, for getting me to recognize forcefully, just like Satan said, I want to force him to heaven. You forced me to the heaven bookstore and made me buy this book. I'm very grateful that you took Satan's part to enlighten me.
I mean, my husband calls me the adversary every now and then, but I think you meant it in a better way. So I'll take yours.
Oh, I mean that with absolute pure angelic wonder. I'm very happy. I'm very grateful that you did this. I hope you'll do that. I hope we can. I'm going to try. I keep saying this, but I am going to try to make this annual Sunstone circuit instead of just Saturday. I'll see if I can at least get every day in. One, I like to support the group. But it was so much fun meeting you and Gene Judson. And did you notice that Gene slighted me? That dirty rat. He didn't
No.
mention that he met me at Sunstone when he was on Steve Pineker's Mormon book review. He mentioned everybody else except the backyard professor.
Wow.
So I'm not going to mention that I met Gene Judson at Sunstone.
Yeah, don't mention it. Don't mention it. But Carrie, I just want to say thank you. Because just like with Matt, I told Matt the same thing, because you guys are in a group that you don't have to do anything, right? You could have stayed, you could have kept wearing your white shirts, but you were saying, you know what, something's not right, and you left a system that was made for you, right? That you have everything, you get planets and everything. And so thank you for taking a stand. Thank you for caring enough that I knew that if I said, get this book, that you would resonate with it, because I know you. And so I'm just so grateful for your platform and that you care about issues like this, because you don't have to, but you do.
That's an
So
interesting
thank
point.
you.
My very good pleasure. Thank you for being a part of my journey. We will do more shows together. I think it would be a blast. We will discover other topics or perhaps books. Next year, it's my turn to drag you to the bookstore. So bring some extra cash.
I'm ready.
Save your pennies, I'm telling you.
I'm saving them. And for anyone who did not see Doug, Vincent, and Backyard Professor last Sunday, fantastic episode. So please go in and watch that one. It was so good.
That was fun too. This was every bit as much fun. I mean, all of my guests, when I have them, are just so delightful. So thank you once again, and we shall get together again soon and do some more of this fun argy-bargy. In the meantime, let me thank my audience. I appreciate all of you. I appreciate all your support, financially, spiritually, psychically, something like that. Boy,
all of that.
Yeah, all of that. Yeah, thank you. That's all I want to say. You guys have a wonderful evening, and God bless all of you. Thank you, Summur. See you later.
Bye, guys.